Before we jump right into the theory, if you want to win a Spider-Man Far From Home hot toy, all you gotta do is like the video, subscribe, turn on notifications, and let me know in the comments which of the 3 Spider-Men you're most excited to see. Now, on with the Goblin theory. Spider-Man No Way Home is perhaps one of the most anticipated Marvel projects in recent memory, aided largely by the reintroduction of multiple iconic villains from prior franchises, including that of Sam Raimi's original trilogy as well as Mark Webb's Amazing Spider-Man duology. The abundance of new promotional material and behind-the-scenes content has given us an extensive look at some of the newly refined villains, some of which haven't been seen in almost 2 decades. With the full lineup of the Sinister Five finally taking shape, No Way Home is set to be a who's who of Spider-Man's most iconic antagonists and supporting cast from the previous franchises. Among these iconic names is possibly one of the most recognizable villains in modern comic book movies, and that is the Spider-Man villain that started it all the way back in 2002, Willem Dafoe's iteration of the Green Goblin. Recently, a leaked set photo surfaced online that seems to show a stunt double in the Green Goblin's attire from the first Sam Raimi film, and the details of this photo seem to give significant hints as to what Norman Osborn may have been up to throughout the course of the last 20 plus years. 20 plus years that he's been largely unaccounted for, which was further augmented by his appearance in the recent promotional materials. So stick with us today, watchers of the Marvel Multiverse, as we dissect both this photograph and the recent appearances that surmise what he has been up to and what the Green Goblin has been doing in this 20-year period, which seemingly sets him apart drastically from the other villains. What has been happening with Willem Dafoe's iconic iteration of the character since the events of his supposed death, and the proposed fan theory that he might have actually been spending the last 2 decades as a multiversal nomad, making him the true greatest threat of Spider-Man No Way Home and the leader of the Sinister Five. The idea that he's been traversing timelines and exploring the multiverse as a pioneer of a multiversal scientific expertise is not only logical by in-universe standards, but also makes logical real-world sense within the confines of the marketing perspective and is supported by comments from Willem Dafoe himself. The fact that there is way more going on with the character of Green Goblin than many of us anticipate for No Way Home. Before we begin, we have a brief disclaimer to address. All available sources seem to indicate that this photo is legitimate, and the recent TV spots have helped to reinforce the idea, but we still cannot say with 100% certainty that it has not been fabricated. However, we are 99% sure. We will therefore be operating under the general assumption that not only is this photo authentic, but that it has not been doctored or altered in any way in accordance with our sources, though feasibly this is subject to change. With that out of the way, let's get straight into it. Perhaps the most recognizable detail with this suit is the significant battle damage that the suit seems to have weathered, and while it's probable that this is a suit that has just experienced the climactic battle, it's also intriguing to wonder if this is its default state from when we first meet the Green Goblin. It has also seemingly been confirmed with the first No Way Home trailer that Alfred Molina's Doc Ock will have de-aging technology applied to him, and the actor himself has confirmed that his story will pick up just minutes after the ending of Spider-Man 2. But despite this, it has also been hinted at that the stories of the 2 additional Spider-Men that are set to appear will have been taking place in real time, meaning their stories and their lives have progressed. This means that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man will have been living out their lives as superheroes in real time since the endings of their franchises, that being 2007 and 2014 respectively, and they will have aged accordingly. This means that while Dafoe could feasibly be pulled straight from his death scene and into the present day like Doc Ock, he could also have been living out the past 20 years in real time, much like Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Man. Willem Dafoe himself has recently gone on record to state that he's been through some upgrades and design changes, which could address both his uniform as well as the hooded design that we briefly saw in the trailer. He also stated that there are a few additional tricks up his sleeve this time around. While on a panel between himself, Alfred Molina, and Jamie Foxx, he hinted that Goblin has been through the ringer and has had a significant amount of story detail between his departure from the Sam Raimi films and his new depiction in the MCU. Willem Dafoe specifically states, "I don't know how much we want to fool with spoilers, but the look is a little different. Both Norman and the Goblin are further down the line, and they have a few more tricks up their sleeve. There have been some upgrades." This seems to hint at the latter option, that Norman has been living out his life in real time for the past 20 years. And if this is the case, where has Norman Osborn been for all of this time? If Osborn either survived his encounter with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man during the climactic warehouse fight in 2002 or is a variant from somewhere else in the multiverse, then it seems to indicate that he might have been living out the past 2 decades in accordance with the rest of the MCU, potentially as an interdimensional wanderer. Seeing as he was not heard from again throughout the course of the Raimi films, if he was pulled into another dimension upon his supposed death, then he may have been left to explore other timelines upon the rebirth of the multiverse. If this is the case, then he could have been pulled into the multiverse as it was reopened into the MCU after his supposed death. And if he was lost in the multiverse, it could explain the 2 decades of battle damage that his suit has supposedly seen, assuming this photograph is showcasing the state of his suit in the near time of his reintroduction in the MCU. Goblin also seems to have constructed a portable storage system, carrying with him a sling, a bag, and multiple canvas belt compartments, indicating that he was likely constantly on the move and unable to settle down for too long. And if Norman was trapped in a reality that he was not familiar with, this would not be too far-fetched at all. It's also important to remember that Osborn is a gifted scientist and a curious mind who would likely be fascinated by the prospect of neighboring timeline. His curiosity and infatuation with his discovery of the multiverse could lead him to exploring as many timelines as he could gain access to, pioneering a brand new field of highly advanced science that the leading minds of his timeline hadn't even begun to tap into. Surprisingly enough, this would not only make in-universe sense, but would also be a smart move in accordance with real-world logic. The idea of catching up with an iteration of Osborn who has spent 2 decades traversing the many timelines could allow him to offer insight into the science of the multiverse, seeing as not even Doctor Strange is able to articulate a sound explanation as of now, and the multiverse is drastically unexplored at this point in time. Strange even specifically states that the multiverse is a concept of which he knows frighteningly little, hinting that most of his explanations will likely be largely speculative at best. No Way Home is the opportunity for the MCU to provide their explanation of the multiverse to both the characters involved as well as to the audience. And what better way to do this than to use an experienced multiversal traveler with decades of experience to do so? Given Osborn's incredible intelligence and affinity for scientific exploration, it is completely in line with his character to traverse as many timelines as possible in order to learn as much as he could about his new discovery, or potentially even being lost within the multiverse, as well as Marvel's long-term agenda, and would be a smart move for Kevin Feige and the executives at Marvel to make given the current circumstances of the MCU and the multiverse. However, there is one major missing piece to this theory. This prevailing theory is predicated on Osborn's survival, which has ample precedent in the comics. The most prominent explanation as to how he survived comes directly from the pages of The Amazing Spider-Man number 122, where Osborn was impaled through the heart in a near-perfect recreation of the scene in the warehouse. In the comics, Osborn did in fact die, and would remain dead for years, leaving the mantle of the Green Goblin to his son Harry for the immediate future, which is in line with the events of the Raimi trilogy. When he did finally resurface, he recounted his experience of waking up buried, and the explanation given is that the serum that gave him enhanced physical characteristics also gave him a significant healing factor that was able to ultimately resurrect him. Could this indicate that Norman Osborn may have been spending the last 2 decades as a multiversal nomad, learning as much as he could about his neighboring timelines, and offering a sound explanation for multiversal science based on his decades of experience? One final curious detail to note is that the goggles on the stunt double seems to be a near replica of the ones that Otto Octavius wore during his fusion reactor experiments. And while this may simply be the stunt double toiling with costume pieces or a fun coincidence, there is also a distinct possibility that these were also a tool that Osborn used for a specific purpose. Many have theorized that the fusion experiment is what helped to tear Otto from the timeline at the end of Spider-Man 2. And if this is in fact the case, then it's fun to explore the possibility that Osborn has cracked the secret to interdimensional travel via the use of the fusion reactors. But this is again speculative as of now and serves as little more than a fun thought experiment. Whether it's via the use of fusion reactors or other methods, the idea of Osborn being a multiversal nomad makes an incredible amount of in-universe as well as practical sense, and seeing the character take this route could be fascinating and a good starting point for the beginning of his new character arc and his rise to prominence throughout the course of No Way Home. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of this theory? Do you think the Goblin was a multiversal nomad, or is this simply battle damage from the events of the film? Also, what are your thoughts on Willem Dafoe's comments about the character? As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button to assemble and join our team, and have a great day.